Hi, I'm Kate, and on this episode of Bite Scized, we're exploring brownies. More specifically, how to take your favorite 9x9 brownie recipe and scale it to literally any pan you want. From party size to personal, we got you covered. I'll be honest, in high school, I felt like conversions were kind of irrelevant and useless to me, but I use it all the time when developing recipes, whether it's converting from cups to grams or scaling a recipe from a really small amount to a larger amount or whatever pan I have in it. It's a really useful skill to have, and I use it on almost a daily basis. So here's the plan. We're gonna take my favorite brownie recipe, which is in a 9x9 pan, and scale it to all these different types of pans. We have a baking sheet, 9x13 pan, bread loaf pan, which is 9x5, and then this cute little mini bread loaf pan, which is 3.5 by 6 inches. Seriously, how cute is this? So obviously the volume of the batter is gonna be the biggest thing that we need to calculate, but we do wanna consider some other things too. The first is the material of the pan, because different materials conduct heat differently. Metal is generally recommended for cooking brownies, cakes, and things like that. You can use something like a cast iron skillet or glass. Glass is a common one, but they don't conduct heat quite as quickly, and so you're not gonna get quite as even of a bake. So we recommend using metal, and that's what we're gonna keep consistent throughout here. Now, if you don't have metal pans, no fret, you can do it in a cast iron or a glass baking dish. I've done both, but you just are going to have to play with the baking time a little bit more, and it's just another variable you're adding into the mix. We also have to think about the height or depth of the pan, because all of these pans actually have pretty different depths, and that's also going to affect how long it takes for the brownies to bake. The way the brownies would bake in this really shallow baking dish versus this deeper 9x13 dish is going to be really different. When the brownies bake, the heat starts on the outside of the brownie, either the edges of the pan or the top, and then slowly diffuses toward the center. So the time it takes for the heat to diffuse to the center of the brownie will depend on the depth of the pan and how thick the brownie is. All right, now that we've considered some other factors like the material and depth of the pan, let's get to the actual conversions of the batter and volume of the batter. Okay, so the first thing we're going to need to do is figure out the overall volume in each pan. So volume is just the amount of space something takes up, and for this, it's about the amount of space that's inside that pan that we can fill with batter. So to do this, we need the length, width, and height for these rectangular or square pans, and we're gonna take each of those values and multiply them together. So for example, for our 9x9 pan, we're going to do 9 times 9, the length times the width, times 2.5, which is the height, to get 202 cubic inches. The reason it's cubic inches is because we're doing inch times inch times inch, which is 3 cubic inches. We'll do the same thing for our 9x13 pan, for our mini loaf pan, for a baking sheet. And then for the circle, we're going to take the area of a circle, which is pi r squared, and multiply that by the height. And to figure out the radius of a pan, we're just going to take the diameter. So for an 8-inch pan, the diameter is 8 inches. So the radius would be half of that, which is 4, and then just plug in all the numbers. So to convert from one pan to another, we just need to compare the total volume. So let's say we have a 9x9 recipe and want to convert it to a 9x13 pan. We're going to take that volume for the 9x13 pan, 292, put it over the volume for the 9x9 pan, 202, get 1.45, times that by 100, and we know that the 9x13 pan is 145% of the volume of the 9x9 pan. We can do the same exact math for the mini loaf pan and the sheet pan, and we're going to see that the mini loaf pan is 21% of the total volume, and the sheet pan is 113%. All right, so we've done our formal conversions, but now let's talk about practicality. It might not make sense to do exactly 1.8 times the recipe. It would make a lot more sense, practically speaking, to just round it to 2, and then we might have some leftover batter, and that's okay. So with that said, our sheet pan, which is 113%, will actually just be 1 times the recipe. We're going to keep the recipe the same. For the mini loaf pan, we're going to take 1/4 of the recipe, and we'll explain why in a second, because there's a secret there. And then for the 9x13 pan, we're going to do 1.5 times the recipe. Not only is this easier on the math, but it also takes into account one ingredient that's kind of a drama queen and doesn't make it easy to convert with fractions and decimals. Any idea what that is? Eggs. So unlike flour, where we could easily add in like a tablespoon, a little bit of flour, you can't add in a little bit of an egg, and it's really hard to get either like 1/3 of an egg or half an egg. It's a lot easier to work with whole eggs, and this is actually how a lot of recipes are developed. They're kind of all centered around the egg because all the other ingredients are a little bit easier to scale and change in fractions, whereas the eggs aren't. For our recipe, we stole the brownie layer from one of our favorite triple layer cookie brownie Oreo recipes, which we'll link below too. So delicious. And all you need to do is take some melted butter, add in some oil, then light brown sugar, white sugar, and eggs, and give that a good mix. The reason for doing both butter and oil and light brown and white sugars adds more complexity and helps the texture of the brownies. Then add in a ton of cocoa powder because it's your only source of chocolate, but it's going to be delicious because you're going to add boiling water to it, which will bloom the chocolate and make its chocolate flavor really come to life. Add in baking powder, flour, and pour it into a pan and bake. For all the other size pans, we literally did the same exact recipe, just scaled the ingredients and also watched the baking time. They're both done. We have our 9x13 pan, which took about 55 minutes to 60 minutes. And then we have our little mini bread loaf pan, which took about 20 minutes. Both the batter completely filled the pan. I think we had the right amount, so that's great. Now let's check out the texture and taste. So one thing to note is with our little mini bread loaf pan, it definitely sunk in the middle a lot. I'm not sure. I think I might have pulled it out a little bit too soon. I was worried about it over baking, and I think it should have done another 5 minutes. Really good. I can taste. I did not fully bake it, so I would give it another 5 minutes. I think, again, I was just like, oh, it's so much less. It's going to not require as much time. But actually, I think it still required a lot of time because there's a good amount of depth to the pan, and the pan was pretty tall. But outside crispiness, delicious. We did a second trial, added a little bit more baking time, and it came out great. So the depth of the pan was really important to the baking time rather than the actual size of the pan. We also tried out an 8-inch cake pan, which took the same amount of time. Kind of interesting and delicious. Next up, the 9x13 pan. All right, inside looks great. Really happy with that texture. There's that fudginess. We have the crispy outside. Let's take a bite. Every time that crispy outer coating is the best part. Every time. Overall, I think these taste pretty much exactly the same as the other brownies. Feeling really good about it. So we tried out so many different scaling options, taking that 9x9 original recipe and trying it in the baking sheet off of camera, doing the 9x13 today, as well as the mini loaf pan today. And I think we had success with all of them. The main thing I'm seeing is that, yes, we want to make sure we do our calculations beforehand and do our homework, but you also just have to be observant and a little flexible on the actual time it takes to bake and look at it, and it might take a second trial, and that's okay. After we also sat down and really looked at all of our different trials and the data and observations we saw, we realized that the depth of the pan was by far the biggest factor in determining the amount of time it took to bake. Here's our challenge for you. So we tried all of these different baking pans. The only one we didn't do was a bread loaf pan, 9x5. So see if you can figure out the conversions, the best way to scale it from the 9x9 pan, and let us know in the comments how it goes.